auditing the Fed? I mean, don't you have to look at people's books and see what's on their books? Well, the trouble with audit the Fed is that that's not what it's about. It's a misnomer. The Fed's books are thoroughly and completely audited. We are audited first by an outside private sector accounting firm, which gives us a clean bill of health. Secondly, all of our books, all of our financials, everything is open to the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, which is, works for Congress and for the government and can look at anything it wants to look at. And third, we also have an independent inspector general that is able to, evaluate any aspect of the Fed's financials or activities that it would like. If you'd like to see more about this, the Fed's website, federalreserve.gov, has a detailed discussion of all the various audits that the Federal Reserve goes to. So all our financials, all of our activities are thoroughly audited with one exception. And that exception is that in the law which created the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, there is an exception made for monetary policy. In other words, GAO can do anything it wants at the Federal Reserve, but what it can't do is go in and audit a monetary policy decision. Now, what the Audit the Fed bill would do is very simple. It would strike that clause. So if the Audit the Fed bill passed, then a congressman who didn't like the Fed's latest interest rate move could say, GAO, go audit that. And what that would mean would be the Government Accountability Office would send its staff into the Federal Reserve to look and see, why did you guys raise interest rates, and begin to investigate that decision. And it seems to me that's the first step toward basically the Federal Reserve no longer being an independent central bank. Now, there's a very strong agreement around the world that if you want monetary policy made based on long-term considerations and not based on short-term political considerations, then the central bank needs to have some independence in making monetary policy. What this bill would do is strike at the very heart of that independence. So it's my opinion that many people who support the bill just think it means what it sounds like, which is something about the financials. It has nothing to do with financials. It has to do with whether or not Congress can ask the GAO to investigate a decision by the Fed that it doesn't like. And again, I think if you want a healthy economy, you want to have a strong and independent central bank, and that is not consistent with that bill.
This is the last question, and it comes from Twitter. So there's a vibrant discussion of macroeconomic issues on social media. Do you get any information from these discussions, and if so, how? Well, I read blogs. I have to say the 140 characters kind of limits the discussion on the Twitter. So those, I think blogs have become a pretty important source of intellectual exchange. The same way, there was a very important step. Dean Collins will remember this. Used to be that years ago, way long time ago. If you were an academic and you wrote a paper, then you had to submit it to a journal, and it took 2 years, and it got published, and it was like 3 years after you wrote the paper before anybody knew what you were working on. And then came the internet and working papers and so on, and pretty soon, papers were available almost immediately for professional evaluation. But even that, of course, involved the long delay involved in doing the research and writing the paper and so on. What if you had a shorter perspective, a shorter idea that you wanted to put out there? Well, again, the internet has provided useful ways for people to communicate, to discuss interesting ideas in monetary policy or anything else. I follow a lot of baseball blogs myself, actually. So that's just the next natural step to creating a conversation among people, and I think that's been very constructive. So there are a few Federal Reserve blogs. The Atlanta Fed has one, the New York Fed has one, and we have Twitter.
We have Facebook. We're really moving along here. We're still a little bit old-fashioned, but I think the social media do provide a really convenient way to communicate quickly to a group of people, to exchange ideas, and to keep track of what's going on in a particular area. So, I think there's some positive developments there.
Well, perhaps we should encourage you to follow the tigers while you're
Okay.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd like to thank our questioners for posing the questions. I'd like to thank all of you in the room and online for joining us in today's conversation. You can find information on future policy talks at the Ford School on our website and through our Twitter site, and I hope you'll follow us. We certainly will be following the Fed. Chairman, thank you very much for joining us today. We are